Hello, today's date is April 29th, 2006. My name is Jeff Ames. I'm a graduate student majoring in history at Salem State College. I would like to thank Mr. Ed Luzinski for agreeing to be interviewed for the Settlement House Oral History Project sponsored by the House of Seven Gables and the Salem State College Department of History. Mr. Luzinski, who were the first in your family to come to the United States?
My grandfather and grandmother, and I think they were the first Polish family to be married here in Salem. They were married in 1872. And they had 7 children.
Mm-hmm.
They lived here on Beckett Avenue, down the street off of Derby Street. And my grandfather was a carpenter and a painter. And he was a contractor with another partner he had here. And we found his name in the archives in a book that had expenditures in it, and he had his name in there as doing some work for Caroline Emerton.
Okay.
Now, one of my aunts was very active here in the Gables.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Stacia, and she was very active with the Polish Women's Club.
Okay. If I could ask you, do you know why your family decided to emigrate here?
No, that's something I've questioned about. But of course, after the grandparents are gone, it's too late,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
and it's bothered me to no end.
Okay. Now,
But they did somehow or other wind up in St. Louis, Missouri. I kind of question if that's not where they actually landed, because that was the gateway to the West at that time.
sure.
I think I give you a wrong. I said 1872. It
Yes.
should have been 1892.
1892.
That was the gateway to the West. And so how they got from St. Louis, Missouri to Salem was something else. But I have an idea that one of my grandmothers, Laskowska was her maiden name, had relatives here in Salem. That's why they came here.
Okay. Now, do you still have any relatives living in Poland?
No. And I wish I had known some.
Sure. Mm-hmm. You were born in Salem.
In Salem, yep.
Yeah, 1929.
Right.
Were you named for anybody special?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. Now, can you tell me your mother's maiden name and what she did while you were growing up?
Her name was Mary Jozanowski. Here again, she was born in Brooklyn. And her family came from Brooklyn, but she was the oldest of the children. And they came here to Salem. Here again, I think it's because they knew somebody in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
They originally lived here on Daniel Street. And then when my mother got married to my father, Joseph, they moved over to Bridge Street. And I had lived there till the age of 21.
Okay, what did your father do as a career?
Actually, he joined the Navy when he was 17. And he was in for 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
But as a sideline, he had worked with his father, doing painting with his father and his brothers.
Now, did he see service in a war?
World War I, he just missed the active service there. It was 1917. But he had been to Russia, been to China, most everywhere you can think of.
So he was very well traveled.
Very well traveled. And at one time he served as a submariner too.
Mm-hmm. Are you older? You have a sibling, a sister. Are you older or younger than your sister?
She was older, and she just passed away, this past February. And she was the one where made me first aware of the House of Seven Gables. We both went to Polish school, but she used to hang around with a lot of kids from here in Derby Street.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to go to the Gables. They called the settlement the Gables. So she started going there, and one day she come home with this little muffin called a Snippy Doodle. She made it in cooking class. So that was my introduction. And then my cousin Freddie lived on Kosciuszko Street. He brought me over to the wood shop, and I was very impressed with the wood shop over there.
Mm-hmm. What childhood memories do you have of the two of you and your sister?
Well, I spent a lot of time down the street where the old city garages used to be, playing down there with my other cousin.
Mm-hmm.
But my sister was involved with his sister, and so they're usually off on their own. But they spent a lot of time in the Salem Common and at Collins Cove where we used to go swimming. We had a big backyard with a lot of neighborhood kids our age, so that's where we spent a lot of the time.
And how well did the two of you get along?
Very good, yeah.
Now, were you older?
She was
She
older.
was older. Okay.
She's about 5
Sorry.
years older.
Okay. Can you tell me about some of the friends? You mentioned a few already that you had and what you liked to do as you were growing up.
I just spent, used to go to the Polish school, St. John the Baptist School here on Herbert Street.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting subject in itself. His daughter married my son this past year. When I saw him the last time I saw him, I said, "Ron, are you the one that helped me build my first chicken coop on Bird Street?" And he says, "Yeah, I brought some stuff up for you." Yeah. So he was one of my first friends, but here again, the friends were from the Polish school: Bobby Pysicki, Zitzelski, Al Gesick, who was my best man at my wedding, Bobby Nesta, a lot of guys like that.
Mm-hmm. What did you like to do growing up with your friends? You mentioned swimming down at Collins Cove and building a chicken
A
coop.
lot of bicycle riding. Yeah, we all had tricycles or bicycles eventually, or carts, and we lived on a hill, so we used to go running down the hill.
Not too many injuries, I hope.
Oh no.
Okay.
No.
How did you like school while you were growing up? What was that like for you?
I felt intimidated, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. School was run by the nuns, and they had their own methods, and I guess I probably really didn't adjust.
Do you have any memory of any sports or clubs that you participated in when you went to school?
Not really, no.
Okay.
No.
Did going to school help you decide what you wanted to do in life to make a living?
Well, going to school, I think I wanted to follow in my father and grandfather's footsteps in being a builder and a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the vocational school for a couple of years. Then I went to the Essex Aggie because here again, the chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went there for 3 years, and I worked on quite a few places in Essex County. Up in Manchester, the Heath Farm. In Linfield, the Worthmore Demonstration Farm. And that was a big joint run by the Worthmore Feed Company. And then when I graduated, I operated my uncle's farm in Middleton, poultry farm. So I did that till I went into service.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you have any? Was there, even though school seemed, you told me that it was kind of a story in and of itself, and it was a little bit difficult for you. Was there any teacher there that made an impact on you that you can remember or recall?
I can't say that I recall.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. How did you meet your wife, Mr. Luzinski?
That's interesting. I was hanging out, before I went in the service, I was hanging out with my friend Alvin, Bobby Nestor, and we were playing tennis at the Salem Willows. Along comes this group of girls that they wanted to play too. So we got to know them, and one was my wife Phyllis. And so I kind of had a feeling for her, so we dated a few times. And we eventually got married after I came out of the service. This was after the service that I met her. And we got married, and when we had our wedding, she wanted the wedding pictures taken here at the Gables because she grew up in the neighborhood and she attended all these settlement classes. So she knew all the kids up and down the street and of all the activities.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first real introduction to the Gables.
Mm-hmm.
We had our wedding pictures there, and I have to say that out of 6 of our children, 5 of them had their wedding pictures taken here at the Gables.
Now, what was courtship like when you and your wife were dating? What can you put that back into the year that all took place to?
Probably a lot of movies,
Mm-hmm.
some picnics, stuff like that. There, we did a little going to different beaches along North Shore.
Mm-hmm. Was that in the 1940s, 1950s?
This has been in the 50s, late 50s.
Okay.
Excuse me, before the 50s, yeah.
Okay.
We got married in 55.
Alrighty. Now, can you tell me about your military service?
Okay, I kind of lucked out. I got drafted in 1951 during the Korean War. And while I was working with my uncle at the poultry farm, I also was driving a truck for him that he had rented out to the state. And so when it came to time application for the Army, what was your previous occupation? I wasn't going to put down chicken farmer, so I put down truck driver. So what happened, I took my basic at Fort Devens, then I got shipped it to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I wound up in the 298 Transportation Truck Company. Now, they were picking guys from that company to go to Korea, but I heard the battalion headquarters had an opening and they were going to Europe. So I volunteered. And I did wind up in Europe. And I wound up outside of Bordeaux, France, in Boussac, in a wine country. I never could figure out why we had a base out there until I learned about the Berlin Wall. And so we're way in the rear. If there's going to be any trouble, we would have been a transportation for any activities going up by the Berlin Wall. So that's why we were there, that we had a pleasant service time over there. I got to go to Spain,
Mm-hmm.
To Portugal, went to Lourdes and Fatima, I went to Paris, went to Notre Dame, and I also went to Garmisch up in Germany. That was interesting. So I did have a chance to see some of Europe that way. And actually at our base, I got to know they had a group of Polish guys, Polish Labor Battalion. They were Polish Army units that had disbanded, and they were doing different work for the different units. So I got to know some of those guys, but never that close that I could relate to where they were from, or if they knew of anything of the Luzinski family in Poland.
Mm-hmm. You have children. Could you tell me about your children?
6. David, Lucille, Billy. Billy went into the Navy after high school. Most of all of my children have worked here at the Gables. Like I say, after we got married, Phyllis and I got married,
Mhm.
she was still coming here to Gables for knitting classes. At that time, I was working at Sears Roebuck's. I was home sick one day, and she come in and she says, they just told me that the caretaker over the Gables is retiring. So I started to think about it. I said, there's nothing that would bother me from working over there. I've been in construction, I've been in gardening,
Mhm.
and I've done a lot of odd things that would fit right in.
Yeah. Now you've mentioned three children. Who,
6.
Yeah, you've mentioned
Okay.
three. Who are your other three?
Paul,
Mhm.
Mary, and Barbara.
And do they all live locally?
Yes, they do.
And what do they do? Are they connected still to the Gables?
No, they're all all married. David at one time was a chef, but here again he went into contracting, and he's been working for a local contractor. My daughter Lucille became an X-ray technician, and she married a doctor, living in Marblehead with 2 children of her own. Billy, I told you, went in the Navy,
Mhm.
and he's living off of Highland Avenue. Paul just got married 2 years ago. They just had a baby. He's living up the Willows. But he went to work for Sons Air Conditioning in Swampscott. And he's now working at Eastern States. Northeastern.
Okay.
He's working at Northeastern. And he's in charge of the air conditioning department over there.
Okay. Now you mentioned about your initial involvement with the settlement house. Can you recall that for me again? How you first became connected with them, and then what you did?
Well, I came here and applied for that job that my wife told me about. And have you interviewed Mary Burke yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. I rang the doorbell on the back door, and Mary Burke came out, and I told her that I was interested in working over here. And she introduced me to Mrs. McIntyre, who was the director at that time. So I had a nice interview with Mrs. McIntyre. And then about a week or so later, I was still working at Sears Roebuck's. We were upstairs in the building plumbing department. Up comes this gentleman with a Homburg hat like Eisenhower used to wear, black coat, fur collar. And I said to my boss, George, I said, I think this guy's looking for me. It was Franklin Hubbard from the Salem 5-cent Savings Bank. He was president of the bank and president of the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to him for a few minutes. He said, would you come down to the bank and talk to a couple of directors? So a couple days later, I went down, knocked on the door of the bank. The bank was closed. The guard let me in. And Franklin Hubbard, Arthur Arnold, and Richard Siemens, who was also a banker in Chelsea. So here again, I interviewed for them. A long table, and they're at the other end, I was at one end. But we had a nice talk,
Mm-hmm.
and they told me that I would be accepted over here.
And what's your earliest memory? You mentioned the Snippy Doodle cookies that your sister used to
Yeah.
bring home. What do you have any other early memories of the settlement house and the House of Seven Gables?
Well, a lot of times I was involved with some of the things that were going on. Like, we lived in the Fippen house.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the Fippen house?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, downstairs they had sewing and knitting and cooking classes down there. And one of the things I did for them was remodel the kitchen downstairs. They had a flat counter with Bunsen burners and all that, but I put in cabinets and brought a stove in there, and so they had a comfortable modern working area.
Mm-hmm.
The wood shop I was very interested in, and at one time or other, I had a group of ladies that was taking wood shop with me. They were interested in some private projects, so we took care of those. And we had a good relationship with them.
Good.
But Turner Hall
Mm-hmm.
was probably the busiest place. It had an arts and crafts room, the wood shop, like I told you,
Mm-hmm.
and a triple room, what they used to use for a lot of different groups. But one thing that impressed me was some of the paintings on the wall, which some of the local boys here in Salem, not too far away from here, you can see his house, Ziggy Brimsky painted some seascapes. Very, very nice. And I was kind of perturbed that we couldn't take those down because they were painted right on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the building came down, we lost all that.
Oh, that's too bad.
But Turner Hall was a place of activity. Saturday afternoon, Ruth Bell used to teach tap dancing and ballet. That was Friday, and on Friday evening, she had dancing, pre-teen dancing for the kids. Then she would sleep over the Gables and be here on Saturday, and she would have the teenage dances on Saturday. And I helped her with some of the music. I used to play the music from above the loft there.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was the big activities. And here again, I also look back on these teenagers. A lot of them grew a friendship over the years. They grew up over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these kids got married from the friends that they knew at the Gables. I know a couple.
Mm-hmm.
One of which, let me mention his name, because he was Commodore of the Sea Scouts, was Louis Jaworski.
Mm-hmm.
Louis Jaworski was the skipper of the Sea Scouts here, and that was a very active boys group. They had a monomoy boat at the foot of the Turner Street, and they would have different activities. They would go sailing, they would go camping on the islands, and so it was a very, very active group. And they had, when they moved from Turner Hall, they had their activities down here.
Sure. Let me ask you, what do you think is the most valuable contribution that the Settlement House has made to the community here in Salem?
Well, perhaps I had several. And one of which I told you about the book,
Mm-hmm.
is the Girl Guides. It gave them a chance to earn a living while being active in the Gables group settlement.
And those are the guides that would work in the Gables?
Right.
Okay.
To giving it tours,
Mm-hmm.
but it gave them a lot of confidence in meeting the public. And it's amazing where some of these girls wound up. And so that I think was a big achievement. But one of the things I remember, somebody once told me that there isn't a house up and down Derby Street that Mrs. McIntyre and Mrs. Chapin wouldn't be welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
That's how friendly they were to these groups of kids going to the settlement.
And Mrs. McIntyre and Mrs. Chapin were
Were the directors,
directors?
yeah,
Okay.
at that time, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now, why do you continue to interact with the Gables today?
I attend some of the functions over here.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm down to just coming for lunches on Tuesdays. And here again, some of the people that went here to the Gables come to join us for lunch. So that's a kind of a nice reunion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What can you tell me about the Polish community here in Salem? You've told me quite a bit already, but what else can you tell me about
that's
the
a history
Polish
in
community?
itself.
Sure.
Before I retired, I thought I was going to do a history of Derby Street. And I had my own problems. I had a heart attack. I lost the sight of one eye.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never continued on that. But starting at Hawthorne Boulevard, and between the area from Essex Street to Derby Street to the waterfront was the whole Polish community. You could walk from Hawthorne Boulevard. There was a store on the corner of Hawthorne Boulevard. There's a little parking lot there now. was Mary's store. Coming up the street, across the street was Union Street Garage, owned by two Polish boys. One was a Fabraszewski. I don't know the other one, but he was related to the Fabraszewski. And down Union Street was the Russian Aid Society, which was very prominent in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But Union Street also, I like to say, was a street that went through what is now Pickering Walk. But the street had an overpass walk to the Pequot Mills. And a lot of people, elderly people that worked here, that lived here, worked at the Pequot Mills. So that was their shortcut to going to work to the mills. They didn't have to go down Hawthorne Boulevard and go up Canal Street. So that was something. But coming back to Derby Street, across the street was Sobeys Lunch, which was a bar room, but Stella put out a lunch for the guys coming home from work. Next door was a little radio shop. On the other side was a Polish undertaker, Pochansky. And that was Herbert Street. And up Herbert Street was the Polish school, the old school and new school. The old school was a former church, which I think belonged to the Immaculate Conception Church.
The one right on the corner of the...
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And the new school was a building that they built primarily for the school. The old school where the church was classes from 1 to 4,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other side was 5 to 8. And they had an auditorium alongside that school, but we used to call that the new school. But further down Herbert Street was a Jewish synagogue. Here again, incorporating the Jewish people that lived in the neighborhood. From there on in, coming back down Derby Street, across from from the Custom House, was a building that first struck my kid's mind, was the Polish Army veterans. It was a building right on the beach. My uncle was a member of that. He was in the Polish Army. And we used to go there for Valentine's and Christmas parties. Then, when the war broke out, when they invaded Poland, 1939, that group joined with the new veterans from the Second World War to the Polish Legion of American Veterans.
And that's the building right down here.
It is now.
Mm-hmm.
But originally, it was on the corner of Bentley and Derby Street, where there used to be a volunteer fire department,
Mm-hmm.
and they had an engine in there. Didn't have any horses or anything, but they had the engine in there that they pulled out with a pumper and took care of any fires in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But coming back down Derby Street from the Polish Army veterans, across the street was St. Joseph's Hall, Polish Roman Catholic Union. And they were predominant in starting a Polish church up on St. Peter Street.
Mm-hmm. And now St. Joseph's Hall is part of the National Park.
Right.
Okay.
But that building had many activities, not only in the hall upstairs, dancing and stuff, but I went to many wedding banquets downstairs in St. Joseph's Hall.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very active place,
Mhm.
very active. Now, looking out from St. Joseph's Hall down Kosciuszko Street was another building down by the water, the Kosciuszko Club. Here again, they were active in their own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to Derby Street, next to the St. Joseph's Hall was a Polish restaurant, Derby Lunch. And across the street from there was a furniture store owned by the Kabanichuk family. Now, most of the furniture in my mother's house was bought there. I still have the dining room set. Beautiful, beautiful furniture. Not only did they have the furniture business, but they had an oil business, which they used to deliver oil to all the houses.
Mm-hmm.
We were one of their customers. Next to that, on the corner of Daniel and Derby Street was Mrozi's Market, food store. Very active place. My aunt used to get